Some people never wanted your love. They wanted your obedience. Have you ever noticed how someone's behavior changes the moment you stop doing exactly what they expect? At first, everything seems normal. They smile, they support you, they make you feel accepted. But the moment you begin thinking for yourself, the moment you stop explaining every decision, the moment you stop reacting the way they want, something shifts. Suddenly, their kindness fades, their patience disappears, and they begin acting in ways that seem confusing. Not because you've become a different person, but because you've become someone they can no longer control. I am the Watcher, and here in Shadow Insight, we explore the hidden mechanisms behind human behavior, the truths most people sense but rarely understand. If you've ever experienced someone becoming strangely cold, overly critical, or unexpectedly distant after you started setting boundaries, stay until the end, because what happens next isn't random. There is an invisible psychological pattern behind it, and once you see it, you'll never look at difficult relationships the same way again. If you enjoy exploring the hidden side of human nature, consider subscribing, leave a like if this topic speaks to you, and tell me in the comments, have you ever watched someone change the moment they realized they could no longer control you? Most people imagine control as something loud, orders, threats, manipulation that everyone can see. But real control rarely looks like that. It hides behind ordinary conversations, a disappointed sigh when you say no, a joke that quietly makes you question yourself, a comment like, "You've changed," or perhaps, "I miss the old you." At first, these words don't seem dangerous. In fact, they often sound caring. But watch carefully. The goal isn't always to express concern. Sometimes the goal is to pull you back into a version of yourself that was easier to influence. Have you ever noticed how some people become uncomfortable the moment you stop justifying your decisions? When you explain everything, they feel involved. When you stop explaining, they feel excluded. And for someone who is used to controlling the emotional dynamic, that silence becomes deeply unsettling. Imagine a friend who expects you to answer every message immediately. At first you do, not because you're forced to, but because it feels polite. Then life becomes busy. You answer a few hours later. Nothing dramatic has happened. Yet suddenly their tone changes. Too busy for your friends now? The message isn't really about your response time. It's about restoring the old balance. The balance where your behavior revolved around their expectations. The same pattern appears in families. A parent who constantly tells an adult child what career to choose, what partner to date, how to spend money. As long as the child obeys, everything feels peaceful. The moment independent decisions appear, the criticism begins. Not because independence is wrong, but because independence weakens control. This is why people often mistake control for love. Control can feel protective, attentive, even generous, until the day you make a choice they didn't approve of. That's when something hidden becomes visible. Their support was never completely unconditional. It depended on your cooperation. Human nature always reveals itself eventually. Not when everything goes according to plan, but when someone hears a calm, respectful, confident no. And that is where the real story begins. The strange thing about people is very few will admit they want control. Most don't even realize it themselves. They'll say they're only trying to help, that they're worried, that they know what's best. And sometimes they genuinely believe it. But beneath those explanations, another force is often at work, the need to preserve certainty. Jung believed that people often hide the parts of themselves they fear the most. Someone who secretly fears being unimportant may seek control because control creates reassurance. If they can influence your choices, your emotions, your reactions, then they feel secure. Not because they are stronger, but because your predictability calms their own uncertainty. Have you ever wondered why some people become increasingly emotional when you remain calm? It's because calmness is difficult to manipulate. Emotional reactions create opportunities: anger, guilt, fear, defensiveness. Each reaction gives the other person something to work with. But calm confidence offers very little. It becomes a closed door. Adler observed that many struggles between people are, at their core, struggles over significance. Everyone wants to feel that they matter. Some people earn that feeling through respect. Others try to obtain it through influence. If they can shape your decisions, they feel important. If they can't, they begin to feel powerless. and that feeling is uncomfortable. So they don't usually attack your arguments, they attack your confidence. Notice how criticism often appears only after you become more independent. You think you're better than everyone now? You're selfish. You're impossible to talk to. These statements rarely address what you actually did. Instead, they create emotional pressure. Pressure designed to make you question yourself. Because a person who doubts themselves is far easier to guide than a person who trusts their own judgment. This is why confidence often changes relationships. Not because confidence hurts people, but because it quietly removes the invisible handles they used to hold on to. Most people never realize that the real battle isn't about winning an argument. It's about deciding who gets to define your reality. And once someone loses that ability, they rarely stop trying. They simply change their strategy. When someone can no longer control your decisions, they often begin trying to control how other people see you. Watch carefully. This is the moment the game changes. Direct influence has failed, so they turn to indirect influence. Instead of telling you what to do, they start shaping the environment around you. Have you ever noticed how quickly a confident person can suddenly become the subject of rumors? Or how someone who sets healthy boundaries is described as cold, arrogant, or difficult? That isn't always a coincidence. It's often an attempt to recover lost power. If they can't make you feel guilty, maybe they can convince others that you should. If they can't change your behavior, maybe they can change your reputation. Human beings are deeply social. For thousands of years, acceptance meant survival. Our brains are still wired to fear exclusion. People who understand this, consciously or not, know that social pressure can accomplish what direct control no longer can. So the criticism becomes more subtle. They don't accuse you outright. They ask questions that plant doubt. Have you noticed how different they've become? I'm just worried about them. I don't even recognize them anymore. On the surface, it sounds like concern. Beneath the surface, it's often something else. A carefully placed seed. Because once enough people begin questioning you, you may start questioning yourself. Nietzsche once suggested that people often resist those who remind them of their own limitations. Someone who refuses manipulation also reminds others that they too could refuse it. And that can be deeply uncomfortable. Your independence becomes a silent mirror. It reflects possibilities they have avoided. Instead of facing that discomfort, some people try to break the mirror, not with violence, but with whispers, with exclusion, with subtle disrespect, with attempts to isolate you from the very confidence you've built. This is why the strongest pressure often appears after you become emotionally free. Freedom doesn't threaten healthy relationships. It only threatens relationships that depended on your compliance. And that's the uncomfortable truth. The moment someone realizes they can no longer control you, they stop fighting for your obedience. They start fighting for your image. Here's the part most people never realize. The moment someone loses control over you, you also face a test. Not a test of strength, a test of self-knowledge. Because when the criticism begins, when the distance appears, when people suddenly misunderstand your intentions, your first instinct is often to explain yourself, to prove you're still a good person, to defend every decision, to clear every misunderstanding. And that's understandable. No one enjoys being judged unfairly. But have you ever wondered why some people seem determined not to understand your explanation? Because understanding you would force them to accept that they no longer have influence over you. And for some people, that is harder than believing the worst. The strange thing about human nature is that we often mistake acceptance for peace. We think peace comes from making everyone comfortable. But real peace begins when you stop making your identity dependent on someone else's approval. This doesn't mean becoming cold, or arrogant, or emotionally distant. It means learning the difference between being kind and being controllable. Healthy people respect your boundaries even when they don't like them. Unhealthy dynamics often interpret boundaries as rejection. That's why the same word, no, can be received in two completely different ways. One person hears, I respect your decision. Another hears, I've lost my influence. The word never changed, only the person listening did. With time, you begin to notice something surprising. The people who truly value you don't disappear when you become more independent. They adapt, they communicate, they respect your growth. The ones who only valued access often become frustrated the moment access has limits. And that realization changes everything, because it allows you to stop asking a painful question: why did they change? And replace it with a more honest one. What part of our relationship only existed because I was easier to control? Watch carefully. People rarely reveal who they are when life is easy. They reveal themselves the moment they realize they can no longer shape your choices. Today, we've uncovered something many people spend years trying to understand. Control is rarely obvious. It often disguises itself as concern, as advice, as protection, even as love. But the moment that control disappears, the strategy often changes. Some will question your confidence, some will attack your reputation, some will quietly distance themselves. Not because you've become a worse person, but because you've become a person they can no longer direct. And that was the hidden mechanism we promised to reveal. When someone can't control your behavior anymore, they often try to control the story about you. Once you understand that, many confusing relationships suddenly begin to make sense. But here's the deeper truth. This isn't only about recognizing manipulation in others. It's about recognizing the temptation within yourself. Because every human being at some point feels the urge to influence, persuade, or hold on too tightly. The real challenge is learning the difference between guiding someone with respect and trying to own the direction of their life. The healthiest relationships survive freedom. They don't fear it, they grow because of it. If this perspective made you see human behavior differently, subscribe to Shadow Insight for more explorations into the hidden psychology that shapes our lives. And tell me in the comments, have you ever realized that someone wasn't upset because you changed, but because they could no longer control you? I am the Watcher. Until next time, keep watching, because human nature always reveals itself eventually. But when the story people tell about you changes, do you defend yourself or do you ask why they needed a different version of you in the first place?